exactly.
Hello and welcome to Church of Entropy live streams.
Hello, everybody. This is Chad Thunder. I'm not gonna say that.
Chad Thunderclock, master of time.
Yes, exactly.
All right. I am joined by Bubblegum Gun. I am not sure if you want to go on camera, but I can add the window to the.
Sure, if you want to, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I can do like what I do with Doobid, where it's like just your icon, and in this case, it'll be if you want to put on your video, you can. But at this point, it's just let's see here. All right, so why don't you start by telling us what you think about morality, just while I set up this interface thing here.
All right. Personally, I don't believe in morality, and even more objective or subjective, because I think objective and subjective are still basically the same thing. And I came to this conclusion stemming from the idea. I'm sure everybody's watched Fight Club, and in that movie, it's telling you don't let objects own you, and so basically also read Max Stirner, and what Max Stirner is telling you, don't let ideas own you, and this includes the idea of morality. To own an idea is to willing to betray it. So, like, if you own morality, you have to be willing to betray that morality. And this came to me in a dream last night.
Did it? That's actually something called quantum mechanical observer effect. I mean, that's not exactly it, but if you wanted to prove that or establish an argument in support of it, because you can't really prove things absolutely right. Sort of see that with whether people ultimately a proof rests on whether someone agrees it's a proof. But yeah, that's kind of true in a way. Like, that's not the exact way that I would phrase that truth, but there is actually some truth to the idea that if you hate something, your subconscious can't really tell the difference between love and hate on the level that all it knows that it's focused on something. So you get things where people who like really don't like something end up acting exactly the way that thing would appear to act.
Oh yeah, it's like some sort of ironic fate.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. There's like this, there's something maybe ironic or I don't know what you call it.
Like the Twilight Zone trying to teach you a lesson, like about your own beliefs. Yeah,
the universe giving you a swirly until you repent.
Yeah.
So you don't believe in morality. So I think it's maybe it's one of those things like not believing in God. Like, it depends on the definition, right? Like, there's ways to define morality where you could say, no, that's not really how it works. But I think there's a way to define it that it's fine. It's just consideration of, let's just say it's optimized sense experience. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine. Because, I mean, people can have morals or ethics or whatever they want to name it. It's fine to hold these things, but you gotta be careful that they don't hold you back.
From what?
Like, for example, you don't want to hold a principle or a morality so much that you become some sort of absurdity.
But what if the morality's valid? Then at the limit, it wouldn't be absurd.
Well, I would have to ask, like, which morality is that? Because when people tell me, the first thing I ask when people tell me there's such thing as objective morality, ask them, okay, which morality is that?
Yeah. Consideration of, or how about I'd say there's maybe more than one definition, but if we start with optimized sense experience, optimized experience, maybe just experience period.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain that more further to me?
Like, if you think of the state of, okay, so whatever state of mind you're in right now, you think of it as being on a spectrum between the best possible state and the worst possible state. It's not at either end, it's somewhere in the middle. Or maybe off to one side, right?
Okay.
So if everybody is moving up, that's the most moral situation. If everybody is moving as much up as they can, that's the most moral situation, because you're going to a state that is desirable. So morality necessarily is something that's beyond self-interest. So if you think of it like as what it is we're axiomatizing biologically, the first thing we're axiomatizing is the self-orientation. So you have to consider yourself. That's like the ground of morality is self-love. And then, but that's not a sufficient condition to consider yourself moral. So there's an implicit sort of attribute of morality that it concerns others as well. So the way to sort of universalize it or absolutify it or whatever you want to call it is like, just have to consider that if you axiomatize that there's a shared root of consciousness, like the consciousness mechanism is the same for everything conscious. It's just a matter of degrees of consciousness. Like I'm more conscious than an amoeba.
Mm-hmm.
And my evidence for that is that, much more complex of an organism, a single cell. I think I'm probably smarter than an amoeba. Saying that there's a shared root of consciousness in the sense that we're all conscious because what makes us conscious is a photon waveform.
Photon waveform. But what do you mean by a photon waveform?
Well, why do you look like you do instead of like a, pile of rocks?
I wouldn't know. I would just say biology, but I don't think that's the answer.
Well, the answer is that you have an animating force in your body,
mm-hmm.
which is a light form, and it's the reason why you look the way you do, as opposed to another thing which had the same elements as you, but none of the order. Because what's the difference between life and non-life is essentially order.
Yeah.
So
then I would say also
we need the ordering principle. So we just need something that has to satisfy what's called the least action principle, which means it can't violate any of the existing laws of physics. And it has to account for everything we observe, like the fact that you have, two eyes type thing. That's something that needs to be explained, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would say a lot of things need to be explained.
And who can explain that, right?
Yeah, I don't know who. I don't have the answer to that.
Well, what do the people say? They say biology, right?
Yeah.
Did you see my debate on T-jumps about evolution? I tried to soberly and calmly. No, just kidding. It was billed as a shit show, so I played as a shit show. But anyway, I was trying to be calm, and I could have become calm at any point if he'd actually acknowledged my points, but he wouldn't do it.
I find TJ funny because he calls for objective morality.
Isn't that the funniest joke of all time? That he actually thinks that is gonna actually. What does he think that people are gonna remember in 1,000 years? Wow, imagine amazingly compelling objective morality, which is basically just the plot of the Matrix, but with the bad guys as the good guys. Just saying. Okay, trying.
The trouble I find with his whole epistemological argument is like this. It lies on the false presupposition that reality is like objective,
which is not true, right? It's relational.
Yeah.
Reality is relational. So if we we can totally understand what that, not totally understand, we can see what that means in terms of what it sort of shows mathematically. But we need to, if we want to define objectivity, what we need to basically do is define it on top of what the universe actually is, which is relational.
Yep.
Which means you have to understand what relational means before you can go into what objective means, because I think objective is one of those things where our human mind tricks us. It's like free will. Objective, what does that really mean? Like, how would you define that term?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking seriously. How would you define it?
Objective free will?
No, objective. Just the word objective.
Oh, just the word objective. I would say a objective, not objective.
So you're talking about a noun. The noun objective as opposed to the adjective. So are you saying the noun adjective or the adjective of objective doesn't exist? Is that what you're saying?
I'm gonna have to word like something objective. Because what is objective in the universe?
That's the whole point, is that the term seems like it makes sense, but actually doesn't make sense, because it's just one of those things we've like tricked ourselves into thinking makes sense as humans. And my example was that free will is another one of those things that we do that where we're like, yes, I have free will. And it's like, wait, what does that mean? And then it's like, okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. Right, back to where we were starting, because this was supposed to be a stream about morality, okay? So
Okay.
here's the argument is that morality is, it's called the Ahimsa principle, which is minimizing harm. So best morality is what minimizes the harm or suffering or whatever you want to call it for all beings. That's basically what I would say. That's morality. And it's something that you can have varying levels of subtlety of understanding on. So you can have really good morality or not great morality. And I'd argue most people don't have access to morality at this time because they haven't learned that it's natural to be selfish, and they're still fighting their selfishness on some level and feeling guilty about it for religious reasons. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Well, I gotta say no, because I don't believe in any morals. But where do you think this selfishness stems from?
It's just natural. If you're not selfish, you're dead. Evolutionarily speaking, basically, you're not going to survive if you're not self-oriented. So people have sort of been tricked into a slave morality where they actually do feel bad about something natural of being selfish. And that's why so many people get so angry at me and call me arrogant, is because they're like, well, why don't you hate yourself as much as I do? It's like, I don't want to.
It's like the easy answer.
Like, is that okay? Am I allowed to not want to destroy myself on the principles of, quote, morality? Whether you agree in morality or not, and I don't even want to fight you on that, but you have to agree that it doesn't really matter if you believe in it, if other people believe in it. It's like it exists. It has a certain existence, even if it's not, quote, objectively real, whatever that may mean.
Yeah, I acknowledge that.
You don't think it's one of those things where it would just depend on the definition whether it was real?
Well, that's like saying I can come up with this definition I just made up thin air, and that would make that real.
Well, the difference here is that there's an actual word that exists for it. It's like, if it's not real, why did we come up with a word for it?
I think. Let me think about that. That's a good question.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to say about morality is that pragmatism is not morality. Okay, because pragmatism is something that necessarily has to exist as an abstraction on top of morality. Not necessarily morality, but any kind of principle system. Okay, so a morality is a type of principle system. There's other types of principle systems like logic, axioms, right? So morality functions on the basis of axioms. So when you're talking about a moral axiom, you're talking about something that will compel the best result for all sentient. So most formulations of this have taken that, what I said, the form I said is the ahimsa, the minimizing harm or minimizing suffering principle, or optimizing, on the other hand, like side of that is basically optimizing the experience. So that's what I would say morality exists. And of course I would say it's defined that way, and obviously it exists as a theoretical possibility that things could be better. Sort of makes the whole idea impossible, right?
Yeah, because in order,
go ahead.
I would say, because in order for there to be morale in the first place, there has to be a thing that can feel, we humans.
Well,
something.
If someone only cared about themselves, you probably couldn't call them moral. You might call them, accomplished, or something good about them, like good looking or something like that. But if they didn't have a single care for anybody but themselves, you could not qualify them as a moral person.
Yeah.
So it's at the very least it's consideration of others. But there's like an additional argument that if you don't have consideration of yourself, how well can you really consider others? If you hate yourself, that's your template for everybody else, and you're sort of projecting that bile on them to try to, quote, help them or make their sense experience better by virtue of trying to espouse this principle. And my point I'm saying is that most people aren't at a point spiritually right now where they can espouse it.
Oh, I'm actually thinking about that, like trying to digest, because I'm always looking for new ideas, new thoughts.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've been working on a bunch of different things, ideas. I've got did you see me on T-Jumps? Would you call him TJ? I was calling him Tej to my husband, like joke, but I like TJ.
No, I didn't see the
Reminds
TJ.
me of Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. That's the only issue with it. You see that one?
No, I didn't see that one.
He's here. He's had Indian food and he's joined us. Thank you very much for joining, Mr.
Hello?
W. Male. Have
Yeah,
you met?
that's
Do you prefer to be called Bubblegum Gun or just Bubbles?
Bubbles, just to keep it short.
Nice. Bubbles. This is what are we got? What are we calling you tonight?
Mr. White Male
Yeah.
tips fedora.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That is my logo there. It's representing the white race tonight.
Sweet. Well, I would say white isn't a race. I would say that the Irish is a race.
Let's
Yeah,
not
it's
do
a
that
joke.
right now. It's not a funny joke. I don't know how to respond to it. It irritates me because I feel like I'm being put in a position where I just can't win. So let's not make those jokes on the show, please. It's hard for me to focus enough with that feeling like I'm being trolled. And I know that's probably not your intention. I'm just saying.
You want me to change my name to
No.
Fringe Wire?
I just, I'm not going to identify as a color unless that color is saffron. So
Yeah, it's not. I'm not an identitarian, so.
I don't know. I got like nothing against people like.
I just don't want to fucking talk about this shit on my channel.
Oh, that's fine.
Ever. So we're keeping to the topic, okay? So,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on morality? Person who wanted to actually do the stream about morality.
Mm-hmm. Well, and person who said don't stress out about coming right away. Well, yeah. So I was just thinking about. I don't know if you're familiar with, but I'm sure someone in the audience or whoever's listening back to this is familiar with how Destiny puts out this. This challenge, how to build the morality of why is incest bad, right? And he's had all these streams and some of them are like 3 or 4 hours, and it's interesting in the sense that people do have trouble coming up with why is it wrong. But I was thinking about it from another angle, which is there are certain things that I think people do. I mean, I think incest is an example, but I think there's an even stronger example, which is, prove to me morally why you should care more about your family than a stranger. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm not, and, of
Yeah.
course, there's the biological,
The whole depending on them for survival thing. And the whole only a complete piece of shit waste of life would even ask a question like that. That whole thing.
Well, yeah, of course. Please don't get me wrong here. I'm putting it out there as, if people are going to ask stupid questions like why is incest wrong, I'm saying, well, why not ask the dumbest question? It's like, in my opinion, it's just who we are. And it's like, it's not really something that's answerable. It's like, and the same goes for like, why is pedophilia wrong? It just is. There isn't
an answer, and it's because you wouldn't want to be pedophiled as a kid, right? It's a whole consideration of others, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
if you're a kid, do you want to be diddled?
Well, yeah, of course, and so that's
according to Milo.
So that's why it's immoral. It's like that's not hard to figure out. People who try to ambiguate very non-ambiguous things like that are not good people.
Well, here's a question I got. Okay, for like, let's say the human race today would not. Let's start. Would you say that having intercourse with like a child who is 14 years old is bad? You would never do that. Would you all agree to that?
What I consider good and bad is all relative to the minimizing harm principle. So that what you've given me there is what you'd say is like not enough information. Traditionally, I would say that's a little young, but it's one of those things where
1 second, my
are different. That's why morality is a principle thing. You can't judge it based on circumstances of materialism. It has to be a principles-based thing. That's why for morality to make sense, it has to be a master morality, not a slave morality where it's just edicts, where it's like, you can't do this ever.
1 second, BRB.
So yeah, he says, Bubble says he actually doesn't agree that morality exists. Where do you land on that? I don't think you land on that same opinion, but I just thought I'd ask to be sure.
Well, again, I think I was kind of alluding to it. It's like, I think certain things are just, you have to accept that there isn't really like a way to rationally draw it out exactly why. It's just, that is our nature.
You're asserting a negative there. You want to say, I can't do it. Speak for yourself, because I just did it, right? You can't make morality precise. Like, yes, you can. You cannot get the exact field equations, but you can always solve any system. You can solve for the most moral solution, because you have moral axioms.
I'm gonna have to drop out babysitting now.
Thanks for coming in for a while. It's nice to talk to you.
Later.
There are several different religions that espouse the same principle. So whether they're the same religion is sort of like an interpretive sort of thing, isn't it?
So if you take that principle, the minimizing of harm is your core, then...
Well, do we have any rival systems other than compliance?
Hold on. That doesn't answer why... Again, I'm playing devil's advocate. My answer is that I just think you have to agree that that is how things are, and it's our nature.
To do what?
To care more for your kin, for your family.
It's because your survival is dependent on them. Yeah,
but that's not a moral argument.
Yes, it is, because you need to have properly balanced self-orientation to even think about morality. So I was saying earlier that most people aren't at a point where they can actually be moral because they hate themselves too much.
You have to take care of yourself first. Is that what you're saying?
Your bottleneck of morality is your own self-love. Yes. So if you're actively acting against your impulses out of some misguided slave morality implementation of social compliance, which is what most people are stuck in right now, yeah, you can't really be moral. You can be compliant, but compliance is only moral when it's in the service of a righteous master morality.
Okay, and so how are you building this morality, I guess?
Ahimsa principle.
What is that?
Ahimsa principle, the minimizing of suffering or harm or whatever. You think of it like optimizing the situation for everyone.
It's like a utilitarian ethics.
Computational. Utilitarian tends to lend itself too easily to a hedonistic definition. So
yeah, I would say that.
People invoke utilitarianism, justify hedonism, and it's like, no. Okay.
Yeah,
pure hedonism, pure sense gratification makes you not fulfilled. It makes you suffer. So that cannot be.
Oh, well, okay. So I guess that's an interesting way to counter it, because you could say, well, yeah, any attempt to completely avoid contrast or avoid the downsides will inevitably backfire and lead to the suffering that you were trying to avoid in the first place. Is that kind of...
Well, it just sort of relates to fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually being done, right? Like, what is the supreme goal of being alive? What's the best state you can be in? It's enlightenment. Most people don't believe enlightenment's possible because they've been secularized, basically hypnotized to believe that religions are just like superstitious, garbled nonsense. So everything is just rationalization. So where the knowledge and understanding and virtue should be, it's this list of memorized things that are invoked as excuses against the Socratic method, which has become fixed as part of the cultural, whatever you want to call it, interaction, mannerisms. That makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah, so Christianity has basically embedded the Socratic method into our culture.
Christianity has embedded the Socratic method into our culture.
Yeah.
Did we ever
Your whole life is
fully-
basically defending against allegations of inadequacy because other people feel
Mhm.
that is what they should do to feel, basically preemptively get a, front run someone doing it to them, because it is quite uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It took me a
yeah,
really
like
long
the
time to
openness
get the hang of
to-
this, because I'm just like I'm like so goofy in a way. Like I'm sort of in my own world in some way. It's like, what do you mean? Oh, you want to ask me a question? Cool. And then it's like, at some point, it's like, wow, these questions sound like they're coming from the Stasi. And then it's like,
from
oh, it's not the
Stasi.
Stasi, it's just the Socratic method.
Are you saying that the question I asked, or well, I didn't.
I'm not
ask it,
talking
I-
about you at all. I consider you a
Okay.
friend, and I consider you to be
Okay.
respectful. So this is honestly just my own, like, the sum total of all the observations I've made in my life.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, but obviously, this question reminded you of some of these Socratic type things, and it was meant to, right? Because I was referring to you would consider destiny like using the Socratic method, right?
Well, I think it's part of society.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think it was
beyond that, like
it was necessary to depaganize Europe to make
But do you are
Socratic
you
method part of culture, because pre-Christianity we were very pagan, right? Like the level to which I am theocratic or religious or whatever, spiritual, I'd be considered atheist compared to what they were. They were like tra-la-la, like just read the Orphic hymns.
Oh yeah, I
Can't
know
tell me that's
that.
not tra-la-la in the gardens with gods.
Yeah,
Like
back in the
I'm a very
day, it
I'm a
was
very stern. Like I know people laugh at me now, but I'm a very stern monotheist. Do you know what I mean by that? Like I am not traipsing in the garden with Pan. You know what I mean? But that is literally the history there. So yeah. So instead of traipsing in the garden, they had to take the energy of traipsing in the garden with Pan to be redirected to pure self-loathing and the interest of what do you call it? It's bad to be an idolater. So that's just like a long-term sort of hypnosis thing where it's like hate yourself, hate yourself, hate yourself. Like don't be an idealist, basically, because ideal, it's all sort of the same eigenstate in the subconscious.
well, I was really the thing you said earlier made a lot of sense about how people are always they're defending against a inadequacy that really that like that struck me as something, yeah, like even when I was a little kid, it was like, and my mom would always yell at me. She's like, "Stop comparing yourself to other people." But you know,
And it hurts, doesn't it? It feels like a dagger in your chest. Like I've had that dagger so many times, and you know what I think every time it's happened? What about someone? What does that happen to somebody else who's not as strong as me? I'd be so. It hurts so much. That's what hurts. It's not like that somebody did that to me, because it's just like you have shit karma because you just insulted my honor. So I feel literally sorry for you. But it's I do weep for others, because like who has my whatever willingness to be an asshole?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you do have some pride. Like, I think
I don't have shame. I have love of knowledge. Pride is not an emotion I feel I identify particularly strongly with, but sometimes if someone is super arrogant in an ultra self-destructive way, I'll just put the mirror up. I can act. I'll put the mirror up. I can act.
Okay.
I took an improv class when I was in grade 5. That was great. All right. Can you tell me who Chung Lee is? Because I would like to know. Not, I know.
Okay.
It was a joke. So somebody might be joining who might be a troll. If that's the case, I'll have to change the link, but it's okay, because that's what happens. Just pick up and go again.
What about
Please don't be a troll. Are you a troll? Please don't be a troll. There's only 12 people watching.
Hello, Jen.
Sigma.
Oh, good. Doesn't sound like a troll. Hi.
Project Sigma.
Hi, glad to be back on the show again.
This guy was on before?
Oh, it's cryptic.
Many months ago.
Cryptic. Well, I'm going to have to
a
run my
clone.
voice ID engine. Beep, 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 beep. What did we talk about when you came on?
Yeah, where were you? I missed out in the last minute or two.
Well, the call screener should have filled you in on today's topic. It's axiomatic morality.
No, I was listening till then. The last few points.
So you're like whatever the stream delay is?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, let's see the last couple
I think we
things.
sort of traipsed off into the weeds, didn't we?
We were talking about like how people, especially in the Western world, they grow up trying to defend against accusations of inadequacy, I think, right? Was that sort of...
Okay. It's an interesting topic.
Well, I was
guess
transcending the Socratic method, no big deal. But
oh yes,
had to be
I know
done at
for
some point.
your fondness of the Socratic method.
Actually, I love the Socratic method when it works. It works amazingly. And like I tried doing it one time and someone's like, I can't have this conversation because you're doing some sort of religious brainwashing. I'm like, oh, so you can use the Socratic method, but I can't. Okay. I get it now.
Anyway, I thought I'd add proposal. Now you mentioned what was the gentleman's work when stating morality as a minimization of harm?
That is just the dharmic axiom. So
Dharmic,
it's not a person. It's the Indian ancient religion.
Okay. I was curious.
Other religions have also. I'm sorry. I just want
copy that. All right. Well, that being said, would it be unreasonable or plausible that the entire modus of the universe could be considered moral, or morality itself?
Could the universe be considered morality? I would say no, because I've already identified the universe as God, and morality is an attribute of God, not the totality. Because you could say that logic gives rise to morality, so it's in some sense undergirding it. Basically, morality is not fundamental enough to be identified as the universe. But I think you could argue that the universe does have an intrinsic benevolence to it, because we are converging towards a state of consciousness that is more sensitive, so that would be able to minimize the suffering more effectively and be compelled to do so through, like, basically evolution compelling you to be more sensitive.
Okay.
That's extremely simplified, but essentially that, yes.
Well, because what came to my mind was the idea, do you guys operate on the assumption that the universe is infinite?
I think that's one of those fundamentally unknowable things. It's like the ant. Does the ant know whether the planet is infinite? It's like, how? So that's why I say that if for all intents and purposes, we'd say infinite. But we'd also sort of put a little asterisk where it's like, well, if it's actually a barnacle on some gigantic being's asshole and some gigantic, like, our universe, just some, you know what I mean? We can't establish that.
That could keep going, right? But you could be the barnacle on a being's ass, but then that being is made up of something, so on and so
Sorry
forth.
for the horrible metaphor. It's just, I hear these horrible metaphors sometimes and I'm just like, cringe. So I like to repeat them to show people how cringe they are. Hopefully. Go ahead.
Yeah, my initial assumption was that the definition of infinite, which is really a modus of morality, right? Just stretched into forever.
Well, if you just take infinity without morality and just want to talk about infinity, we have two different ways to define infinity in math. So we'd have to commit to one of those or redefine it in some way. Like, I would say that something which has no boundary is infinite.
Well, you know what I like to think of?
Finite.
Whenever the topic of infinity comes up, it's like, I think you could often replace it with indefinite. Because if you think of something like a program has a loop in it, right? But it's ultimately bound by, that computer will eventually lose energy. Even if
those are not at all the same thing, I'm sorry. Indefinite means hasn't been defined yet. Infinity means no end.
I mean indefinite in the sense that it's going to go on as long as there is.
I think what he's talking about is there's a potential for an infinite amount of computers to calculate, I guess. Is that a fair assessment?
It's not about that. It's about whether the universe goes on forever.
I know that was the initial question. I was just.
But this doesn't at all
and-
connect to morality. Like, I don't know, why would you want to... First of all, why would you want to make that argument? And second of all, this seems to be going more into the direction of abstract metaphysics and logic. And
Well, what
away
if
from
what we call ethics is an extension of that morality, right? That modus of infinite.
Well, that's essentially tautological. And only fundamental metaphysical levels can be tautological without catapulting your system into irrelevance, because you're going to have to compete with other metaphysical systems, right? It's not sufficient to have one that's consistent. You know, I'm not saying maybe your metaphysics is consistent in the sense that it doesn't destroy your mind to believe it, but I'm looking to optimize here. So it seems like you're trying to set up an argument. What argument are you trying to set up that you are now trying to pull your way towards through the Socratic method? Why don't we just skip to that, and I'll tell you what the strongest argument. I don't actually mind, because I'm so confident in my arguments. I don't mind saying what the opposition is to them.
Oh, well, first it's a proposal, not so much an argument. So.
Oh, come on, we're all friends
Ben's
here. We can
been
debate
in
each other with it.
debates,
We can have friendly debates without ever risking our wonderful friendship, which will go on for all of our future lifetimes.
So you're so used to these debates that you've been doing. You're like in a combative. I don't. Is Sigma? Are you looking for a fight, or are you just?
No, he's trying to talk about an argument, but I'm just saying, like, I can smell what you're doing. Just tell me what argument you're trying to substantiate. I'm fine to just tell you what the answer is.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that I'm getting some feedback a little bit.
Yeah, so am I.
Is that if we can assume that the modus is infinite, then maximizing outcomes, like the fact that we have this idea, right, could be an expression of that, right, amongst all other expressions, and which would I don't know, seems to easily explain it, I guess.
Morality is not about explaining it. It's about being moral, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty hard to prove or explain morality. Morality is about being a good person.
Yeah, but we'd have to further define what morality is.
Right. Which I did define as minimizing harm.
But you also suggested maximizing outcomes.
Those are the same thing. But there's a competing morality, which is slave morality, which is obedience. So that's the highest virtue. Obedience. So when I hear these kinds of these types of lines of questioning or whatever that you're going in, it makes me think you're trying to trick me into consenting to an argument. That's not the point of logic. The point of logic is to figure out what's going on for real, not to trick people into agreeing with your dodgy metaphysics. It just seems like...
That's a very interesting interpretation.
Well, I care very deeply about people, and that's not a lie. I've talked to a lot of Christians in my life, and I was raised Catholic.
Nobody brought that up.
The point is that compliance is only moral when it's to a righteous authority. Compliance in and of itself is not anything other than just being a slave. That's why it's called slave morality.
So what suggests that pursuing morality, right, greater outcomes, in this sense, would be immoral?
Because you're defining morality to essentially mean whatever the heck you want. Because you said it's like infinity states. It's like if you invoke an infinity, that's a magic trick, right? That's like people get all googly-eyed over infinities. Ooh, infinity. Ah.
No, we do have an element of privation.
I don't even know what that means. I guess for me, it's like, what do I need to, like, for me, my morality is fine. And everything you're saying just sounds really complicated that I need to remember this across all my reincarnations. So you're telling me I can't forget that that's how it works. You can forget it because...
That's a huge claim that you would only be able to verify upon reincarnating.
That's right. And I have knowledge that I couldn't possibly have gained in this life. And there's your proof. And to deny it is simply immature. So By denying reincarnation, you can't remember your past lives. By accepting it, you may be
No
able
one,
to start to remember
no one denied it.
more.
I did not deny it.
Do you deny reincarnation?
No, I don't deny reincarnation.
So you
How can I?
accept? Or you're neutral? Are you agnostic?
It's a likely modus. It makes sense.
Okay.
Right? It fits
So then
congruently
why are
into
you
the puzzle.
chasing morality in the cosmos?
Well, it's just understanding how it functions.
Well, how morality functions, the bottleneck to your understanding is your own consciousness. So how well do you understand how your own consciousness works?
Pretty well.
Okay, well, tell me about it.
About my consciousness.
Yeah, well, that's the bottleneck. So I need to know how well you transcend it to see how I can test you to basically directly prove to you you're not as smart as you think.
Well, I guess I'm getting some feedback in then.
I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I hear it too.
Well, so far it seems that my consciousness is an amalgam produced by the fundamental, I meant the waveform as you call it, right? Collected, right, like converging rivers, right? And that what I perceive as my consciousness is like the crest of a wave, right, of this wave function, right? As it breaks, that's who I am.
No, that's something you create. That's the tip of you. It's not who you are. Who you are is what is able to make that arise spontaneously. It's just one little boop. It's
Well,
the cogito, right?
for the sake of the argument, like as I am here, I know that.
That violates
Well, are you sure?
non-dualism.
How?
Our universe is compelled towards minimal energy, so all the states are the adjacent to the minimum energy state. So you can predict which states are allowable if you can understand enough what the 0-point energy looks like. So,
Well, didn't you? You mentioned your theory about stars, right?
Yeah.
And then pulling energy from the ether, right? Creating space-time.
Well, that's because gravity and uncertainty operate in what you could call different directions, but they're metaphysical directions, so they don't have any distance or time. We got to remember when we're talking about metaphysics, it's all pre-interpretational. It's telling us how to interpret. So something like length, if we think that there can be such a thing as a metaphysical length, then we're deluding ourselves. So there's very specific conditions, right? So in the monad, how many perfect spheres are there?
In the monad, perfect spheres.
It's okay.
Isn't everything the monad? Is it 3 plus 1? Is that the correct answer?
3 plus 1's the measurement limit, but the monad is a Platonic concept of the unmanifest reality.
Yes.
Do you know the answer?
Realm of Platonic forms, correct?
Yeah. So if we're talking, okay, I'll go one level more specific here. If we're trying to construct our best way of understanding the monad, which is infinite, which we can't really deal with, we should reduce it to the minimum energy solution, right? Which is like minimum energy monad type thing. So it should
Would that be best defined as an infinite potential? Because potentiality, like infinitely, would be maximally at rest.
No, it's a set of potentials, right? Because it contains all the archetypes. So the archetypes are potentials which can be filled to various extents. So it itself, like, is the set of all potentials a potential? Well, the set of all sets isn't a set. So think it's like a rule of thumb type thing. We probably would not want to name it the exact same name. Otherwise, we're going to get into self-referentiality issues. Metaphysics is extremely hard because it's like one level of abstraction on top of another, and you got to nest them. It's basically like computer coding, only in 3 plus 1 dimensions. Just kidding. Just kidding. Abacus gang. Where were we? So if we want to design this monad, we got to only have one sphere, because we can't distinguish. Even if there's a gazillion spheres in the monad, can we distinguish them?
Well,
no.
You're talking about how many
monad, right?
spheres there are? Is that what you're saying?
It's about irreducible complexity of the monad.
Wouldn't it?
I don't even
be
know
hard
how I got
to tell
on
just one, right? Because it'd be no boundary. Infinite volume.
It is a boundary, though. The sphere is a boundary. The sphere is the primordial boundary. So without any sort of boundary, you're in an infinite type of situation because there's no boundary. So infinity is what it means when there's no boundary.
Like a band name, Infinite Situation.
Oh gosh. Okay, I feel like we got off topic here. Am I actually answering your questions, Project Sigma, or are we just like way off base here?
No, I mean, like, it's interesting to hear what you think about this idea, right? Because it makes sense to me. I mean, I've been able to plot its function in reality.
Morality is not the right word because, like, if something's going to be morality, it's got to be something that gives people a swashbuckling feeling, doesn't it? Like, it's got to warm people's hearts.
Well, let me put this in there. There is a good reference on the primary states of privation, or what I have termed universally repulsive experiences, right?
Oh.
Which are the
So that's like the opposite of Molly memes. That's funny.
yes.
Okay, what are they? Tell me.
They're the same. They're the same as his. He just didn't. I noticed he described it wrong because that's really what he was talking about, which is theft, rape, and murder, right? These are universally repulsive, but they're not universally. What do you call it? Repulsed from action, right? We all don't want to experience them, but there's nothing to say that any of us will ever enact.
They're not forbidden states, is maybe what you're trying to say.
Yes. But the privation states, or lack of a state, is what is universal, right? Maybe that's a way of entropy kind of expressing itself in another way, conceptually.
It's another way of restating my morality principle. Is like we want to optimize or minimize
Sigma,
suffering. Therefore, maximize suffering is undesirable. See how that's the same assertion but put in a different way? It's basically the
From
same
this
definition
perspective,
as what I'm saying.
I would say that's true.
It's like
From here,
is the same type of assertion. I don't know if it's informationally equivalent because negatives don't tend to be metaphysically equivalent to their positive assertions, but there are exceptions. If you're dealing with purely binary systems, like there are times where, yes, can be the case.
yes.
Isn't logic so much fun?
It is fun. I do agree. I like it. But if this would be true, then it may be I see the correlation with our, when you talk about light functions, right? And how maybe this is where like the Jungian archetypes come from, is a description
the archetypes of Jung would be considered to be part of the monad. And then there's some divine primordial archetypes from which all other archetypes would be drawn.
Yes.
So,
and from our perspective, like we are on a modus of privation, like of lacking. Where
lacking what exactly? Realization of archetype?
Well, I've heard this. I'm getting feedback in. I'm sorry, Dan. That what I first conceptualized is like, well, the state of like the infinite state of the monad, the Godhead, right? And what that state is, if it is a realm of infinite potentiality, right? That's the best way we can describe it. Then what does an infinite potentiality, I guess in a sense, lack from this perspective? Because this is still dualism, and I understand its flaws, right? Its flaws.
It's not dualism. It's qualified non-dualism. It's non-dualism at the fundamental node, and then strategic dualism and trinary, quaternary. Every single conceivable number of divisions is allowable, but they're not all filled because only the minimum energy states are filled.
Yes, as I understood it. Thank you for your presentations, by the way. They've been most informative, giving an updated dialect.
Did you feel better after learning it?
It helped me articulate many things with better skill. So,
that's wonderful. That's exactly what I was going for. I was so glad to hear it. Yay. So I guess I did a moral. I was moral, was I? I made your sense experience better. See?
I believe that's true. Like, yeah, you definitely a greater outcome, right? Produce that, right? Even in this small way, it could be said. But that being said, so go on to the modus of infinite potentiality, right? And the reason I said that because I know like the dualism is an illusion, right? They're both the same thing. They're both moduses of the same element. So in this scenario, okay, then like maybe like you said, spheres like bubbles, right, of distinction, right, of
I'm
discrimination.
sorry, the
like
dualism is not purely illusory. The dualism is actually not illusory at all. It's temporary, not
Yes.
illusory. It's actually quite rigid in a lot of ways.
Illusory.
I'm
Yes.
trying to figure. I'm trying to fix this thing with my audio. But I literally don't know how. I'm just trying to find my settings. I think I just have the wrong audio right now.
Okay.
Well, and do you have OBS
Test.
set?
It's not that. It's because my computer's not picking up on my headphones for some reason. It's just not seeing them. So you're hearing the sound of my computer.
Well, maybe I can remote in and poke around, because OBS can solve a lot of these problems for you. Like, because basically you can tell OBS to separate.
Do I sound any different? Do
I'm
I sound
not
any
getting
different? Or is
feedback.
it still worrying? Ugh, awesome. I'm sorry about that, guys. Okay, let's go carry on.
Well, let's test.
Okay.
Echo.
So,
Yeah.
hello.
I don't hear myself. But do you hear me, Jen? Uh-oh.
I can hear you.
I can definitely, yeah.
Can you hear both of us? Uh-oh.
Yeah, you guys are coming through loud and clear. No problems. Everything's all good. I just did another diagram. So awesome. It's not quite done, but I'm so excited about it. I just really need to organize my computer here because I just have a huge pile of like really disorganized images at this point. I just find this format of diagrams is so good. It's the perfect amount of information. It's like little bite-sized information.
To help you with that. I used to make a lot of diagrams.
My aesthetic approach is placemats.
I could maintain the like really harsh color aesthetic, but just make it so it's easier to see what you're trying. Because you had that one diagram and it was like the lines were, it was like you couldn't really see them, and then I sent it back to you like slightly corrected. Never mind. Well, we could talk about that later. That's tech.
Did you guys want me to continue?
Yes, please.
All right. So I was trying to explain why I think our modus of paying attention to privation, right, it makes sense. Because from this perspective, as if we are such existing in amongst a greater dimension of infinite potentiality, then we need a way to be differentiated, right? Our universe would have to be extruded from the larger mass of that potential. And I've noticed that in the
because there's two words I don't understand. You said we need to pay attention to privation. That's covet means.
We often do.
That's covet means. That's how the mind control works. Extruded, and I don't know what that means.
Well, extruded, like separated, isolated from the greater mass.
Okay.
Right, and that I've noticed in a lot of the mythology that they talk about like becoming reconstituted with the Godhead, with the state of infinite potentiality, right?
That's like the dream. Like Greek,
Eastern, the Vedic tradition, I believe. Vedic, sorry, said that wrong. I believe denotes this, including the Western ones as well, right? Being unified with the God state. And noticing that all of our imaginings and all of our happenings tend to follow this modus, right? We imagine ourselves in always greater states of being, greater experiences. So I wondered, like, maybe this can explain it, from God's perspective, that the differentiation is the only thing that doesn't exist in that.
God doesn't have a perspective. God gives rise to perspectives. There's no such thing as a God perspective. It's like free will. It's just a nebulous nothingness that doesn't exist in our world.
Well, it's as much as a perspective as something can be without.
There are divine beings
and still existing.
Judge. The thing is that this idea of judgment still happens. It's just not God that's doing the judging. It's dead people.
Well, yeah, I
extreme
meant,
souls, if you
I
will.
guess, but if we're expressions of that infinite potentiality, does that make us God in a sense?
No, it makes us micro droplets of discombobulated God-esque garbage floating around.
Is that why we judge ourselves?
But God doesn't judge. God is the ground of judgment. It's the whole thing. We aren't godlike in the sense that we can judge. God allows judgments to happen. God allows for what happens to be basically fair, because God is gives rise to karma, which is cause and effect.
Mhm.
So because we live in a
Understood.
cause and effect universe, it's a fundamental principle, something called resonance. So it's attracting whatever your state of mind is.
Why do you separate the idea that we could be that mechanism in which God judges himself? If that be the
Well,
correct.
judgment is part of the method. It's just, it needs to be the good kind of judgment, because there's two sides to judgment, right? Just like faith, like there's a really shitty side to faith and a really good side to it.
Is it like criticism and constructive criticism?
Not quite. Criticism is part of teaching. It's a necessary
Okay.
part of teaching. So it's sort of something that's like, you don't really want to do it, but you're going to have to. But, sorry, what were the first two examples? You sort of threw me off there. What were the first two things I said before? You said, you jumped in with criticism. What was it before that? I said two things. Brain.
Are you talking to Mr. White?
I was just asking
Yeah.
either of you if you remembered what were the two things I mentioned before Mr. White jumped in with the criticism thing.
You're talking about judgment. There's good judgment.
Ah, yes, judgment and faith, right. Okay. So what's the good side of judgment is discernment. And what's the bad side is being too critical. So that's bad because it doesn't have a meaningful connection with other people, which you need to enjoy, to optimize your sensory experience. You need to have a meaningful connection with people. Some means to that, or to principle, blah, blah, blah. What's that quote? Person who likes spending time alone is either a beast or a god. Like that one. Faith. So what's the bad kind of faith? We could start with that one. Anyone?
Oh, I haven't heard that one, please.
Well, it's blind faith.
Okay.
It's what drives people to do enormously self-destructive things, because it's like, well, you can't be a non-benevolent master because I would never enslave myself to a non-benevolent master, therefore I'm going to have to double down even though you're totally, utterly abusive. I just can't face the fact, right?
It does in one hand, but it also breeds innovation for those who take risks in the unknown, right?
Well, sure. I mean, if you don't mind surfing on the edge of a meat grinder.
Well, sometimes that has to happen, like the first astronauts, right? You don't really know that this is going to work out.
You're basically saying, like, let's kill ourselves for the chance that we're going to, discover a new law of physics as we grind ourselves into a meat grinder?
Sometimes it takes that.
Well, that's a bit weird, isn't it?
But it happens. I mean,
Yeah, we can't say whether or not any of those innovations where men either risked their lives or lost their lives.
There's a difference between
could
having
have
to
happened
make
without it.
sacrifices for things to happen and your goal being essentially to sacrifice yourself.
oh,
No, that's not what we're saying. That's not what I'm saying. Not at all.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting the utility of risk taking, obviously, right? And having to take leaps of faith in order to further new ground.
Right. So the
in a
idea
sense,
with that is that you make the decision from a discerning perspective. You're like, I don't really know, but from where I am now, it seems reasonable. So I'm going to put the faith in for this person to basically bring me to a point where I can understand.
yes, and I would say that you have a higher standard or a higher threshold compared to someone you might say is a religious fundamentalist, right? You require more data and more proof, right, to take those risks, where obviously they need less.
Who's they?
The general religious fundamentalist, let's say, and perhaps that's not always the case. just as an addendum.
Oh, religious fundamentalists. You lost me. I'm sorry. I have no clue what you're talking about. It's getting too abstract and obscure.
Oh, it's just someone who
like
believes
talking
things.
about the whole battlefield again.
Oh, just that there are some people who require less data to believe things, and that's most people actually. It's the heart of propaganda, right?
Well, it's its own. It's a lot of data, isn't it? So they're really
it is from this perspective.
They're just drowning basically in. That's all they've ever been exposed to, so it's never occurred to them that there's anything else, any other way to interpret things.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's all
like
interpreting
think about
within the same basic.
Like the periodic table, and the one you came up with. Like people might understand the model and how it functions once it's made, but they don't always know the backstory of how you created it, right? And
it was revealed to me.
Well, in any case, you did logic it out.
No, it was revealed to me.
Okay.
Not
well,
by
there are
God.
other,
Not by
maybe
God
not the best
directly,
example.
right? Not by God directly. Unless I literally saw it.
Okay. Fair enough.
had to pray to get it. That's where faith comes in. It's super important. It's like the powerhouse. Yet another reason people can't really be moral. They lack faith. Right? Like there's literally a contingent of people who think you can make arguments without axioms. That's how much they are afraid to have to latch on to faith. It's like, can't get around faith. You just have to have faith in reason.
I must use the old definition of morality. Because I do think people are unethical, right? There are better ethics than others, right? But I generally presume...
People are polite. People don't really have ill intent, but they don't act in a moral way in the sense that their actions don't improve the state of mind and state of being of other people. That's all. It's not intentional. It's just they don't know any better, largely. People
they are trying to maximize
consideration of others. Otherwise, it's just purely self-serving, which is being like balanced in your self-orientation is required as a necessary, not sufficient condition for morality. If you're
let's say this.
Who hates themselves, you're fucked. You cannot really be
say this from an outside observer standpoint. Could it be said that they are still operating on the modus of morality, even though it's not as expansive as yours?
No, humility is the basis of morality, and if a person has no understanding of humility through any way, shape, or form, they cannot be said to be moral, because here's what it is. They don't understand themselves. They can't understand others. They have no way to meaningfully consider others or themselves, and it's heartbreaking. That can change.
I would say they're not maximally moral.
Yeah, they're definitely not maximally moral. They may not be immoral. Okay, there's a lot of room between supremely moral and, the worst person who's ever lived. Right? There's like every shade sort of in between, but it is ultimately about
life
that principle.
Is moral?
I would say life is neutral, and then morality is defined relative to life because it's our quality of the photon field, i.e. the fact we're alive, that's giving rise to our ability to reason as moral agents.
Okay. So, I use the definition of morality is the modus of greater states. That's it. Like progression into greater states.
It's not just about that. It's not just about the progression into greater states. It's, well, what are you going to do when you get to the greater state? How do you believe it's possible to transition to greater states? Like there's all sorts of different things. And ultimately, a morality has to do with conforming to a principle and having an actual way to go in and basically calculate is to say, well, out of these 1,000 approaches, this was the one that actually lived up to this principle the best. That's why you get this huge redundancy in terms like big religions. Like I'm pretty sure Jainism, Buddhism also espouse the ahimsa as their fundamental belief. Like
I would agree. I think that alone, it may not be enough, and that I think you're right that
no, it's
morality.
It's not enough in the sense that if it's interpreted incorrectly, it goes fully off the rails easily. Like you get Jains who are like, don't want to step on a bug. It's like, that's not sustainable. Because people like that are going to get steamrolled by people who don't give a shit about killing people and bugs, right? It's just not a sustainable model. Like, if that's what you're spurging over, it's like you're probably going to be dead soon. Just being realistic here. So someone in chat's asking a good question about what humility is. Humility is acknowledging that you are not God, basically. That's sort of the first step. But you got to go further than that. And you got to realize you're in God's universe.
I thought you said things were relational.
They are. But there are still absolute truths.
So wouldn't it be acknowledging your relationship between you and God as being humble?
Assuming you can have a relationship with God ain't humble. So humility is, just the rush of release of bowing of like, I am just a tiny little crumb on God. God's everything. I'm like in a sense, like feels like
that includes you.
God is amazing. Is able to make me feel like I'm in the very center of the infinity. That's how amazing God is.
Yeah, because he's you.
Okay, I'm trying. I'm trying to. I'm trying to answer the question in the chat. I feel like you're disagreeing with me,
Okay.
Project Simqua, and all I'm trying to do is give an idea to purifying flame. But what humility is, that's what I think of it as. Is like I think it's a great virtue to engender humility. I do it all the time. It's very purifying. Ultimately, you're reminding yourself you can't break the laws of physics. So you're just like the bitch of the laws of physics, whether you agree to it or whether you consent or not. It's like thinking you can disconsent sort of makes you a tool, right? So I don't want to be a tool type deal. Humility is what allows you to be, never wrong. The difference between being always right and never wrong, right? Because you don't say stuff when you're not sure. That's the real discernment of it. Even a very dumb person can never be wrong as long as they learn to just hold their tongue and actually not speak above their level of certainty. Yep, that's the
very
way.
Strange.
Yeah, humility is super important, but most people don't really understand it. And I think you'll probably accelerate moral growth through embracing genuine humility.
You are
doesn't
a paradox.
really have anything to do with anybody else. Oh, thanks for saying that. I think. You know what I've been called a lot? Eccentric. It's like I just like to have a good time. Sorry. Like,
are you aware that you often? It's often easy to interpret your presentations as doing that very thing, right?
Yes, I have to put the mirror up to break. I have to break the false impressions, right? Like, The Mask. The Mask, the movie. Everyone's got one of those, and I just gotta break them out. Kind of, they're in a prison. I'm not saying I'm gonna rip everybody's ego out and put it down some sort of a food processor, but basically, we're at a standstill. All I'm doing is like greasing the engine so that things can start brewing, hopefully in a forward direction. But no, I've
heard that before.
Here's my thing: is I love knowledge. And I get super excited about knowledge. And then people are like, when are you going to shut up about this stuff? And it's like, probably never, I guess, unless you tell me to. They interpret that as arrogance because it's passion, though. And some people,
I love existing.
Good. It's easier to dismiss me as crazy because they're too damaged or shocked by the revelations that I make. And these are sort of mystical adjacent revelations and such. So it's, traditionally been quite hidden as knowledge.
I have noticed that your temperance has gotten better.
Oh, is that right? Thanks.
Hey, Jen, I gotta get going.
All right. Yeah, it kind of just ended up being the two of us talking there, but thanks for the suggestion. It was good.
We should, what are you doing tomorrow? Yeah.
You can probably stream tomorrow. I don't have anything going on until an evolution debate on Catterday. That's March. I'm so excited to be debating my actual friend who actually likes me for me. How great is that? My dream is coming true.
All right.
So, yeah.
I'm probably gonna
tune into Modern Day Debate.
Modern day. Oh, there is a modern day debate going on like right now, I think. Isn't there?
I don't know. I'm pretty engrossed in this convo.
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
Bosch has been on tonight.
Oh, all right. Yeah, and then I saw there was like a stream about Bosch. I don't think he was on. I don't know.
Oh, maybe that was it. I know Adam Friendon was.
Yeah. That's what I saw. Adam Friendon had a thing like, "Is Vosh evil?"
That is a debate I might get out of bed for.
Answer yes. Okay.
Is blank evil? I'm basically interested.
All right. Yeah. Unfortunately, my headache's back, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
we
Thanks
should
for
talk
joining.
soon. Yep.
Nice to meet your acquaintance.
All right. Yeah. Have a good one, Sigma. All right. Bye.
Well, Jen, I didn't know if you want to continue on your presentation. I'll hop out of the room.
I didn't have a presentation. It was him who wanted to stream with me.
Oh.
I just had like a pile of diagrams that are not organized at present. So just got one little image on the
So
screen.
were you going to use your the Platonic realms as forms as an argumentation for manifestation of life and the possible explanation for mutations and genetic change? Discrepancy.
No. James said that, like I shouldn't present my model, so I'm gonna try to Socratize the evolution model.
Such a good.
I'm sure that that'll happen sometime in the future. No need to worry about that. I think it'll be fun. I actually kind of had like a warm up on T-jumps there of debating it, but the guy was just whatever. I know Mark though, so I think I'll get farther. I don't know if we'll actually get into the metaphysical points that I'm trying to make. Like Duvid says I shouldn't teach in the debates, but it's like, isn't that what I should want to do? I don't know. I do end up sometimes teaching in debates or making explanations, so maybe I just can't Socratize everything.
I noticed that most of them don't seem to go over your work in any detail. So I know she's trying to argue against that.
Probably be pretty hard to go over it without me explaining it. And that's why I designed them that way. It's sort of meant to entice people to ask questions, to get clarification. So it's very easy to have a misapprehension about meaning. That's why it ends up being so abstract.
That would be a conversation, not a debate.
That is true. Well, my authority wouldn't be questioned in that case, would it? If I'm the one teaching.
No, they treat it as it should, as a intriguing proposal.
I like that. An intriguing proposal. It's like the name of a mystery book or something.
Well, I noticed they all are pretty firm in their beliefs about the appeal to authority.
Appeal to authority. Everybody appeals to authority. It's the way out of hard
authority. They haven't verified.
Oh, blind submission to authority, blind faith in authority.
Yeah, it's like myself. I had to go through some of your data before I was intrigued by it. Right? It was interesting at first, but it evolves, right? And I have to continue to learn it. Before it becomes like I'm as fervent as you are on the issue.
Are you saying there's issues you're as fervent as I am?
Say it one more time.
Are you saying there's issues you're as fervent as I am on? And I would like to know what those issues are, I guess. I don't really think that many people understood this stuff, to be honest. so it's a bit of an unusual thing to talk to someone who's actually conversant. But I suppose the subjects I've been broaching lately have been somewhat simpler than my usual rants. So it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Someone got something out of it.
And to answer your question, yeah, there is one topic in particular I put a lot of emphasis on, and it's the lack of acknowledgement about the verification problem, right? Because I carry only a fraction that I can perceive of the data that's available, right? And there's an issue about the chain of custody when it comes to these verification processes. And I have very little, if no, trust network, right? And I notice a lot of these individuals, they really just regurgitate, they parrot information without ever even just breaking it down in a tertiary sense, like, just contemplating the axioms, right? Maybe the subsequent algorithm of thought. And I just noticed the issue, like, especially these days, right? How we're carried on by these narratives, right? That are just, we're in a world of storytelling, right? And I feel people are addicted to it, right? They don't understand.
People don't know it's a story. They don't know it's a story. They're in the gilded cage, right? They don't know it's a story. So like when people are like upset now, it's like, I get it, you're a little shocked, but it's like, I was super sad before. I'm way less sad now because these people had chance broken the delusion. That's horrible delusion because you just get worse and worse in a state like that. No connection back to anything real. Slow drip of self-destruction.
I can see that. People, when you start to acknowledge that, the world becomes kind of a tightrope instead of a broad foundation.
Yeah, so then you become what is it, tightrope walker?
Basically, it's offsetting, you could say.
You don't have to know. Once you know what the game is, you don't have to play every single round, so I guess it's less stressful in that sense. I suppose that's a lesson I could learn too.
It's just initially, because some people, it's just like I said, throws them off balance, and it's disconcerting to be in that state for a while until you get your balance, right? It's very little that I have to go on, really.
Just yourself, but that's enough for the right person.
Yeah, I agree.
And then me being slightly, eccentric. It's just a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine that they're just dumbasses go down. Just helps be a little easier, but not really something that is any actual, right?
Yeah, they definitely lack exposure. I'm a little more forgiving in my language.
Well, that's good. Different strokes for different folks, I suppose.
Dumbass is a bit confrontational.
Oh, yeah, that's true. What can you do, though, right?
It's honest. You're expressing not only a truth, but how you feel about it.
Well, if I can teach 2 lessons at once versus 1, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, that's more entertaining for me. Did you see the T-jump thing?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I'm on his Discord. I've been for the last month.
I was so dense in teachings in that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jen. You were breaking up a little bit. Yeah, still a little crackly.
All right.
That's
It
better.
seems like it says here my internet connection is unstable, but now it's gone away. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, the T-jump thing. That was great. Whoops.
Did you find any value? Or what value did you find in your experience?
Besting my record of teaching density per unit time. for a pretty long time interval, I'd say. I didn't last the full 2 hours. Like at some point, my esteem just sort of dropped, but at least an hour, more than an hour. Oh, come on!
Well, look forward to the next one. Is that on Tuesday? You said.
Let me check here. It is on Wednesday at 3 p.m. CST. I sure hope it'll be on the YouTube channel. But it actually got like 2,300 views last I checked. So happy about that. Yeah, so the benefit I got out of it, I didn't really get personal benefit out of it. It's not about that. It's about what I give to other people. So there's very high density teachings in there. It's to be unpacked for quite some time, as well as I don't think I made the tradition look bad. I think if anything, I made it look pretty badass and based. But it still wasn't like perfect, leaving the door open for being hopefully something. You don't want to be perfect on the first try, right? Because then every other one.
Yeah, what's it feel like to feel like you taught someone? Just curious.
It depends on the teaching. So
of course, but in general,
there's no way to generalize that. I mean, at the very least, I suppose it would be not displeased or satisfaction, rising to a minimal standard all the way to. I remember when I was really just first working on the QMPT, is probably like 2016. And it wasn't even anywhere near being, it was still a 2D sort of like, it was 3D-ish. Anyway, it wasn't great. It was something. And I showed my friend, I'm sure it came out way worse than it comes out now. It's been like 5 years of oral tradition on an unsuspecting internet. So, but with him, like we'd, been yoga buds for what felt like quite a long time, probably second year, maybe third year, after we met in physics class. And he was just finishing his master's, I think, in physics. And he looked at me and he said, well, if this is true, then Feynman deceived a lot of people. And I just felt this huge heart on, which is where you, think it's self-explanatory sort of, but that was one of the best teaching experiences ever. It's actually open to my interpretation being right versus the usual Socratic bullfight. But then there's other teachings that are fun for sort of their own reasons. More aggressive versions of stuff. This could be more salient, perhaps. They're not my preferred version, though, so just get more audiences, a bigger audience, I mean. Yep. Nice. Hey, Bubbles, if you want to come back, you can come back on the show if you want to tell us about the answer. Morality is a definition. Yeah, that's the thing. Everything's a definition. Everything's about a definition and committing to a metaphysical aesthetic. Luckily, since I get to define the problem, I also get to have the first crack at solving it. So, yay! It's my next plan. Invent a subject that doesn't exist yet. You ready?
A pioneer.
Yeah, I found the word vanguard. I think it really suits me. So I don't know if you have any more questions about this stuff, but sort of like a million different things, like different directions I can go, and that's why I just sort of wait for questions. It's easier to just go along with what you're already focused on, if there is questions, obviously.
Just, I guess I don't have any questions. But I will say that thank you for recommending Avril. your last stream. Avril, I think is his name. Arble.
Oh, his last presentation was definitely in a league above the rest. 3.5 hour one.
Yeah, he's very well spoken.
Oh yeah,
And
he was actually teaching on that. It felt like he was teaching anyway, in a slightly aggressive way. It had a debatey, teachy flavor to it. So I got so excited about it. I think he's going to really be a good teacher. He are like on his first try. He's already sort of.
Well, he's been practicing for a long time.
I've been watching his stuff for a while. He's never made the arguments quite like that before. Granted, I haven't seen his teaching sermons if he does give them. Did you say you knew about him already, or?
No, to thank you for introducing.
You just learned about it. Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I made it through all of his content.
Nice. How much was that?
Not terribly much.
Sounds like a lot.
He did most of his work in the last couple of years. Sporadic videos over the last 9 years.
I'm glad.
But, yes, thank you for your time, and yeah, I'll say that what you've developed has a beauty to it, and I think I understand that this is a reflection of something you have inside you, and I appreciate it very much. Have a good night, Jen.
Hey, thanks. Always nice to have some. I was gonna say happy customers, but that doesn't sound like the right. So, vote on Catterday for what will hopefully be a chilled, awesome, really cool and fun debate where neither Jane nor Mark cringes at any of my antics. See, I'm a goal-oriented person. Oh, Bubbles got his loud nieces. Oh, isn't that adorable? Cheers to Bubbles for helping taking care of the family. Peace. That's about all.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy and her attack dog Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
They control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walked through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating herself with the